The factory was loud, hot, and full of smoke. Machines screamed as gears turned, belts moved, and metal clashed. The air was heavy with dust. It was hard to breathe. Workers moved like shadows, their heads down, their steps weak. Among them was a girl, not older than 20. Her skin was pale and her hands were full of wounds. Every time she touched the sharp metal parts, the skin on her fingers tore a little more. Blood mixed with grease, but no one cared. She was not human. Her ears were slightly longer. Her skin carried a faint silver shine. She was an alien from a poor race sold into labor for the factory. She was nothing more than a tool. She was not given gloves, not given breaks, only work and pain. The overseer walked between the rows of workers. Holding a stick, his eyes were sharp like knives. His voice shouted over the machines, "Faster, or you will be punished." The girl felt her vision blur, but she kept moving. If she slowed, the stick would strike her back. The other workers kept their distance. Nobody wanted to be near her. Some whispered, "She is cursed, she will not last long. Best to stay away." Her wounds grew worse each day, the skin on her palms cracked open. The machines did not stop, the overseers did not stop. Her body was weak, but she did not complain. She had learned long ago that complaining only made the pain worse. On this day, something unusual happened. A new figure entered the factory. The heavy doors creaked open, letting in fresh light for a moment. All workers turned their eyes. A young man walked in. He was human, dressed in clean clothes with boots that did not carry dust. He had sharp eyes, but unlike the overseer, his eyes carried curiosity. He was the manager's son, sent to see how the factory was running. The overseers bowed their heads, but the workers did not dare to look. The girl lowered her eyes, hiding her bleeding hands behind the machine. The young man walked slowly across the floor. Watching the workers, his face was calm, but inside he felt uneasy. The smell of sweat and blood was heavy. He could see the broken condition of the workers. But his father had always told him, "Do not get involved. These workers are not like us, they are property, not people." Yet his eyes caught sight of the girl. She moved slower than the others, her hands trembling. He noticed the red stains on the metal parts, blood smears that told him she was hurt. Something inside him stirred. He stepped closer. His voice was low but carried kindness. "What happened to your hands?" The girl froze, her heart jumped. No one had ever asked her that. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She quickly lowered her head again, afraid the overseer would hear. The overseer noticed the young man watching her. He hurried forward, bowing. "Ignore her, sir. She is weak, but she will work until her last breath. Do not trouble yourself." The young man frowned. His gaze went back to her hands, which she tried to hide. He saw the fresh blood dripping onto the floor. He clenched his jaw. Something was wrong here, deeply wrong. The girl felt his eyes still on her. She thought he would walk away like everyone else. But he did not. Instead, he asked again, louder this time. "How long has she been working without rest?" The overseer's face tightened. He gave a nervous laugh. "She does not need rest, sir. Her kind can endure more than humans." He tried to block the young man's view. But the truth was clear. Her hands were destroyed by endless labor. The girl's knees shook. The world felt heavy. She wanted to fall, but she kept herself standing. If she fell, she knew the overseer would beat her until she could no longer move. The young man turned and looked around. The other workers avoided his eyes. Some looked down. Some turned their faces away. No one dared to speak. The silence was louder than the machines. He realized everyone knew, but no one would stand for her. A deep unease filled him. He thought of his father, the manager, and the words he had always heard: strength is profit, weakness is waste. But now, staring at the girl with wounds on her hands, he felt those words crumble. The overseer leaned closer, whispering, "Please, sir, do not question. Your father would not approve." The young man's jaw tightened again. His hands curled into fists, he was not sure why, but he felt anger burning in his chest. This alien girl, treated worse than a machine, bleeding for his father's factory, why did it bother him so much? The girl finally dared to lift her eyes for a brief second. Her silver-colored gaze met his. It was only a heartbeat, but in that moment, he saw something: pain, fear, but also a quiet strength. And in that moment, he made a silent decision. He would not walk away. The machines kept screaming. The overseers kept shouting, and the girl kept bleeding. But something had changed. A human had seen her suffering, and unlike the others, he could not ignore it. The question was, what would he do next? The next morning, the factory was alive with the same noise. Machines roared, belts moved, and sparks jumped from old wires. The girl with wounded hands returned to her station. Her fingers were bandaged with dirty cloth she found the night before, but blood still seeped through. The pain was sharp, but she forced herself to keep working. Around her, whispers began to spread. Workers spoke in low voices, careful not to be heard by the overseers. "Did you see yesterday? The manager's son? He looked at her." One worker muttered, another added quickly. "He even spoke to her. No one speaks to her." "Not even us." Some shook their heads in fear. "This will bring trouble. The overseers will punish her harder now." "Maybe punish him too," others whispered cruelly. "She is cursed. Anyone who gets close to her will fall into ruin." "Better to stay away," the girl heard their whispers. Her chest tightened. She was used to being ignored, but now the attention made her uneasy. Every pair of eyes seemed to follow her, some filled with pity, others with suspicion. The young man, the manager's son, entered again. His footsteps echoed across the metal floor. This time the overseers greeted him with forced smiles, trying to guide him away from the workers. But he did not leave. His eyes searched until they landed on the girl again. She tried to lower her head, but she could feel his gaze. He walked closer. His boots stopped beside her machine. He spoke softly. "Did you eat anything since yesterday?" Her hands froze. She dared not answer. The overseer was only a few steps away. Watching with narrow eyes, she whispered, barely audible, "No." His jaw tightened. He pulled something from his pocket, a small piece of bread wrapped in cloth. He placed it near her machine and said quietly, "Take it, when no one is looking." Then he turned away before the overseer could scold him. The girl's hands trembled. She stared at the bread. It was simple, dry bread, but to her it looked like treasure. Hunger gnawed at her stomach. But fear chained her in place. If she was caught with food, she would be beaten. Hours passed. The machine screamed louder. Sweat dripped from her forehead. Finally, when no one was watching, she slipped the bread into her pocket. Her heart raced. She felt both shame and relief. That night, when the shift ended, the workers were herded back to their sleeping quarters. Small, dark rooms with metal walls and no windows. The girl sat in a corner, the piece of bread still in her hand. She broke it in half, eating slowly. Every bite felt like life returning to her body. Two other alien workers noticed. Their eyes widened. "Where did you get that?" One whispered. She looked at them, unsure if she should answer. They leaned closer. Did the human give it to you?" She nodded slightly, their faces filled with shock. One whispered harshly, "Do you want death? If the overseers find out, you will be punished worse than ever." Another muttered, "Or maybe he pities you, but pity is dangerous here." The girl lowered her head. Clutching the last piece of bread, she did not know why he helped her. Humans never cared, yet this one seemed different. And that difference scared her more than her wounds. The next day, the factory grew more tense. The overseers whispered among themselves, too. They had seen the sun's eyes on her. They had seen the bread exchange. Anger grew in their hearts. They did not like the thought of a human heir noticing a worthless alien girl. One overseer muttered to another, "We must watch her. If she slows again, we'll make an example out of her." Another smirked, "Yes, let the boy see what happens to weakness." The girl did not know these words, but she felt danger in the air. The workers avoided her even more now. No one wanted to be near her when punishment came. She felt alone in the crowd, surrounded yet isolated. Later that afternoon, the young man returned once more. This time he carried a flask of water. He waited until the overseer turned his back, then quickly placed it near her. His eyes met hers for a moment, urging her to take it. Her throat was dry like sand. She grabbed the flask quickly, drinking a few gulps before hiding it again. For the first time in many weeks, she felt cool water touch her lips. She wanted to thank him, but her voice was stuck in her chest that evening. As the sun fell and the factory lights flickered, the overseers gathered together, their eyes dark with anger. "The manager's son interferes too much," one spat. "We will remind him that this is not his place yet. This is his father's factory." Not his. Suspense grew. A plan was forming. A storm was coming, and the girl, with wounds on her hands, stood at the very center of it. She lay down in her dark sleeping corner, clutching the flask of water against her chest. Her eyes closed, but her mind would not rest. She remembered the young man's voice. His eyes, his kindness, a question echoed in her heart. Why was he helping her? What did he see in her that no one else did? The machines would roar again tomorrow. The overseers would watch her more closely. The whispers of workers would grow louder. And danger was closer than ever. But one thing was certain. Her life had changed. Someone had seen her, and now nothing would be the same. The factory air was heavier than usual. The smell of oil and sweat was everywhere. The girl stood at her station, her bandaged hands trembling as she tried to keep up with the machine's speed. Her wounds burned with every movement. Blood seeped again through the dirty cloth. The overseer's sharp eyes caught it. He frowned, then stepped closer. His voice cut through the noise. "You're slowing down." She flinched. "No, I can keep up," she whispered. Her voice barely audible, but the machine belt was fast. Her injured fingers could not match its rhythm. A mistake came. One piece slipped from her grip and clattered on the floor. The noise echoed louder than all the machines. The overseer's stick slammed down on the metal beside her. Sparks jumped. She froze. "Worthless creature," he shouted. His voice echoed across the factory floor. The workers looked up from their stations, but quickly looked down again, afraid. He grabbed her wrist, twisting it to show her bloody palm. "Look at this filth. You are slower than a broken machine." He raised the stick high, ready to strike her hand again before it could fall. Another voice cut through the noise, firm and clear. "Stop." Everyone turned. The young man, the manager's son, was standing there. His eyes burned with anger. He stepped closer. "You will not touch her again." The overseer blinked in shock. "Sir, she failed her work. She must be punished. It is the rule." The young man's jaw tightened. He took a step forward until he stood between the girl and the overseer. The workers gasped softly. Never before had a human heir stood in front of an alien worker like this. The girl's eyes widened, her heart pounded. She had expected pain, but instead someone shielded her. She had never seen anyone stand for her. Not once in her life. The overseer lowered his stick slowly, his face red with anger. He bowed his head slightly, pretending respect, but his voice dripped with venom. "If you defend her, then you break your own father's rules." "Sir," the young man glared. His voice was steady. "Then maybe the rules are wrong." The factory floor fell silent. Even the clanging of machines felt quieter. The workers dared not breathe too loud. This was dangerous. Words like this could change everything. The overseer clenched his teeth, but he could not defy the manager's son openly. He stepped back, muttering, "Very well, sir. But weakness will spread if left unchecked." The girl was shaking. Not from fear this time, but from disbelief. Her silver eyes lifted, meeting his for just a moment. She wanted to speak, to thank him, but her throat closed. The young man turned to her. His voice softened. "Are you hurt badly?" She shook her head quickly, though her hands were bleeding again. He gave her a look that said he did not believe her, but he said no more. Instead, he returned to stand near the machines, watching the overseers with cold eyes. The whispers began to spread again. Workers leaned to each other, speaking in low tones. "Did you see?" "He stopped the punishment," one said. "He stood in front of her." Another added, "Is he mad? He risks his father's wrath." Some workers dared to feel a spark of hope. If the manager's son could stand against the overseers, maybe things could change. But others shook their heads. Hope is dangerous. It will only bring more pain. That evening, when the shift ended, the girl walked slowly back to her sleeping quarters. Her body hurt, but her heart carried something strange. Warmth. She touched her chest where her heart beat fast. Remembering the moment he stood before her, she whispered to herself, "Why?" Meanwhile, in the overseer's chamber, anger burned. The overseer slammed his stick on the table. "The boy humiliates us in front of the slaves. This cannot be allowed." Another overseer leaned closer, his voice low. "Then we teach the girl a lesson she cannot survive. Let him see how useless it is to protect weakness." The plan was forming. Dark whispers filled the night. The young man sat in his quarters too, but his thoughts were not at peace. He kept remembering her hands, broken and bleeding. He remembered the fear in her eyes when the overseer raised the stick, and the silence of the workers who dared not speak. His chest felt heavy. He had always been told these workers were less than people, yet looking at her he saw a person, someone with pain, someone with strength, someone worth saving. He clenched his fists, whispering to himself, "I will not let them break her." The girl lay awake in her corner. Staring at the dark ceiling, her hands throbbed, but her mind replayed the moment again and again. A human, the son of the factory's master. had stood for her, she could not understand it. She had been told her whole life that humans only see her kind as tools. Yet this one was different. As her eyes grew heavy, one question lingered. Was this protection real, or was it just a moment of pity? The factory would answer soon. For punishment had only been delayed, not erased. The factory floor was silent when the news reached the office. The manager sat in a large chair made of steel and wood. His desk was filled with papers and numbers. He was a tall man with hard eyes and a voice that carried weight like stone. He believed in one rule: profit before everything. An overseer entered, bowing low. His voice shook with anger. "Sir, your son interfered today. He stopped us from punishing a slave." The manager's eyes narrowed. His hand froze on the paper he was signing. Slowly, he looked up. "My son interfered?" "Yes, sir," the overseer hissed. "In front of all the workers, he stood between her and the lash. He even said, 'The rules are wrong.'" The manager's jaw tightened. His chair creaked as he stood. "Call him to me." Moments later, the young man entered. His face was calm, but inside he carried unease. He knew why he had been called. He closed the door behind him. The overseer smirked from the corner. Eager to see the heir punished, the manager's voice was low, but every word struck like iron. "What did you do today?" The young man met his father's eyes. His voice was steady. "I stopped you from breaking someone's hands." "She is not someone," the manager thundered. His fist slammed on the desk. "She is property. Do you not understand this factory runs because of obedience? If one worker dares to resist, all will resist." The young man's chest rose and fell. His voice grew louder. "She is bleeding. She is dying in your factory. You treat her worse than a broken tool." The manager's face turned red with fury. "Do you think these aliens deserve better? They are sold here because they are weak. They are not our equals, they are resources. Nothing more." The young man took a step forward. His fists clenched. "Then your rules are wrong. Father, they are cruel, and one day they will break you too." For a long moment, silence filled the room. The overseer's eyes widened. He had never seen anyone speak to the manager like that. The manager's voice dropped lower. Colder. "If you speak like this again, you will no longer be welcome here. You will lose everything. Your inheritance, your place, even your name." The young man felt his throat tighten. His father's words were like chains, but his heart remembered the girl's silver eyes, the blood on her hands and the fear in her face. He could not step back now. He spoke firm and clear. "Then take it. Take everything, but I will not let her be beaten to death in front of me." The manager's face twisted with rage. His hand shook as he pointed toward the door. "Get out. Do not show your face until you remember who you are." The young man turned and walked out. His steps were heavy, but his spirit did not break. He knew the path ahead was dangerous, but he also knew he could not abandon the girl now. Meanwhile, in the sleeping quarters, the girl sat in her corner, her hands bandaged again with old cloth. She remembered the way he stood between her and the overseer. Her heart was confused. No one had ever done that, not for her. Not for anyone like her. Some workers approached her quietly, their eyes nervous. "The overseers are angry. They say you will be punished soon," one whispered. Another added, "But the manager's son, he is strange. Maybe he will protect you again." The girl shook her head slowly. Her voice was weak. "He should not. He will lose everything because of me." The whispers grew, spreading like fire. Soon the whole factory knew the manager's son had fought with his father because of a wounded alien girl. Some felt hope, others felt fear, and the overseers felt rage deeper than ever. That night, in his small room, the young man sat alone. His mind replayed his father's words. "You will lose everything." He felt the weight of those words, but when he closed his eyes, he saw her face pale and broken, and his resolve hardened. He whispered to himself, "If protecting her cost me everything, then so be it." The overseers, however, gathered in secret, their voices sharp. "The manager's son has gone soft. He will ruin the order. If the slaves believe they have protection, they will rise. We must break them before that happens." One overseer leaned closer, his grin cruel. "Tomorrow, we punish her in front of him. Let him watch. Let him understand that nothing can change." Suspense grew. The storm was closer than ever. The girl lay awake, her hands throbbing with pain, her thoughts heavy with fear and hope mixed together. Would he stand again, or would the overseers crush her tomorrow? The young man, sitting in the dark, tightened his fists. He had already made his choice. He would not let them destroy her. The factory lights flickered in the night. Shadows danced across steel walls, and somewhere between those shadows, two fates had become tied together. One human, one alien. Tomorrow, punishment would return, but this time, the fight would not be silent. The night was heavy. The factory finally silent after endless hours of clanging machines. The workers were herded into their dark quarters. The smell of sweat and dust filled the air. Some collapsed onto the floor the moment the door shut. But the girl could not rest. Her hands throbbed with pain, blood soaking through the dirty cloth she had wrapped around them. She sat in a corner, her knees pulled close to her chest. The memory of the day burned inside her, when the overseer raised the stick when she thought her bones would break, and when the young man stepped in front of her. His voice still echoed in her mind. "You will not touch her again." Tears filled her silver eyes. She had never cried in front of the others. She had learned to keep her pain quiet, but tonight her body was too weak. She pressed her hands against her chest, trying to hold back the sobs, but the tears ran freely down her cheeks. A shadow moved near her. She froze, thinking it was an overseer, but when she looked up, she saw him, the manager's son. He had entered quietly without the guards noticing. He carried a small lantern and a bundle in his arms. Her eyes widened. She quickly wiped her tears, lowering her head. "You should not be here," she whispered. Her voice shaky, he knelt in front of her, placing the lantern down. The soft glow lit her pale face, and he finally saw her wounds up close. His chest tightened, her hands looked torn apart. Skin split open, raw and bleeding. He unwrapped the cloth and shook his head. "They will not heal like this." She tried to pull her hands away, but he held them gently. His voice was low, steady. "Let me help you." From the bundle, he pulled out a clean cloth, some ointment, and a piece of bread. He had stolen them from the storage room, risking his father's wrath. Slowly, he cleaned her hands, applying the ointment. The girl winced but did not pull away. His touch was careful, unlike the harsh grip of overseers. As he worked, silence filled the room. The only sound was her soft breaths and his quiet movements. Finally, she whispered, Why are you doing this?" He looked at her, his eyes serious. "Because you are not a tool. You are not property, you are a person, and no one deserves this." Her heart trembled at his words. She had never heard them before, not once, her whole life. People called her cursed, worthless, less than human, but now, for the first time, someone said she was a person. Tears streamed down her cheeks again. She lowered her head, whispering, "If they find out, they will punish you." "They will punish me." He shook his head firmly. "Let them try." His voice carried a fire she did not understand. After wrapping her hands carefully, he broke the bread in half and gave it to her. She stared at it, then at him. "I cannot take this," she whispered. He smiled faintly. "You must, you need strength. You have survived more than anyone here. That makes you stronger than all of them." Her chest ached. She took the bread with trembling fingers. Eating slowly, each bite filled her with warmth. Her tears did not stop, but now they were mixed with something else, a strange feeling she had forgotten long ago. Hope. She whispered her name, her true name, one she had hidden from everyone for years. Her voice was soft, almost afraid. "My name is Leora." The young man looked at her with surprise. "Leora," he repeated carefully. As if the name was something sacred, she nodded, her tears shining in the lantern light. No one had spoken her name in so long. She had been nothing but a number in the factory, a slave without identity, but now her name lived again. He placed his hand gently over hers, careful not to hurt her wounds. "Leora, I will not let them break you." Her eyes locked onto his. Her heart beat faster, she did not know why, but she believed him. For the first time in her life, she believed someone's promise, but outside, danger was waiting. In the overseer's quarters, the men whispered in anger. "Tomorrow we strike harder. We will not let the master's son change the order. If he stands again, we will humiliate him in front of everyone." The plan was cruel. They would break Leora in front of the workers, in front of him, to show that no human kindness could protect an alien slave. Inside the sleeping room, however, for one small moment, the world felt different. The machines were silent, the overseers far away. In the glow of the lantern, a human and an alien sat together, their hands touching, their hearts carrying the weight of a promise that could change everything. Leora closed her eyes, whispering again, "Why?" Her voice shook. "Why do you care for me?" He did not answer immediately. His eyes softened, his voice quiet. "Because it is the right thing to do, and because when I look at you, I see someone who deserves to live. Her tears fell again. But this time, they were not only tears of pain. They were the night's tears, the kind that carried both sorrow and the first breath of hope. The lantern burned low. Shadows stretched across the cold walls. Outside, the overseers sharpened their sticks and whispered of tomorrow's punishment. But in that corner, Leora held on to the warmth of a human's hands, a name spoken with respect, and the fragile promise of survival. Tomorrow would bring danger, but tonight for the first time she did not feel alone. The morning light did not reach the factory floor. Only cold lamps flickered above, casting long shadows. The machines had not started yet, but the overseers were already waiting. They stood in a line, faces tight with anger, sticks in hand. Their plan was simple: humiliate Leora, break her spirit, and silence the boy's rebellion forever. The workers were ordered to gather before their stations. No one knew why, but fear spread like fire. Whispers ran through the crowd. Something is wrong. Why are they making us stand like this? Leora stood at the edge, her hands still wrapped in fresh cloth. Her eyes searched the room, but the young man had not arrived yet. Her heart pounded in her chest. She could feel the tension in the air, like something terrible was about to happen. Then the head overseer stepped forward, his voice cold and sharp. One of the slaves has disrespected the rules. She has accepted food, stolen time, and dared to receive mercy. Gasps rose from the workers. They all knew who he meant. Leora felt the stares. Some pitied her. Some feared what was coming. The overseer continued. Such weakness spreads like disease, and now... Punishment must remind you all, there is no kindness here. He pointed at her. Step forward. Leora's legs felt like stone, her breath caught in her throat. She did not move, hoping the boy would appear, hoping someone would stop this, but no one moved. The workers watched in silence, not out of cruelty but helplessness. The overseer stepped toward her and grabbed her arm. Pulling her into the center, he threw her to the ground. Her knees hit the metal hard. A small cry escaped her lips, but she didn't beg. The stick raised high above her back. Don't. The shout echoed like thunder across the factory. Every head turned. He was there. The manager's son stood at the entrance. His chest heaved with anger. His hands clenched into fists. He walked quickly, pushing past stunned workers, and stood between Leora and the overseer. She has done nothing wrong, he said, voice loud and clear. If you strike her, you will strike me first. The overseers froze. They hadn't expected him to return, not after his father had threatened him. The workers held their breath, watching history unfold. The head overseer narrowed his eyes. You disobey your father again? I obey my conscience, the boy said. His voice had no fear. And I will not stand aside anymore. The overseer spat on the ground. You will ruin everything, your name, your future, because of this thing. The boy didn't blink. Her name is Leora. A wave passed through the workers. That word, her name, hit something deep. In the silence that followed, something unspoken began to stir in their hearts. The overseer lifted his stick again. Move, boy. Or be removed, but the boy didn't move. Instead, he spread his arms in front of Leora, shielding her with his body. Then beat me, he challenged. Let every worker here see what justice in this factory truly means. The overseer hesitated. His hands trembled, not from fear of the boy, but from the weight of eyes now watching him. Dozens of alien workers stared, no longer with fear, but with curiosity, and a spark of courage. Then someone stepped forward from the crowd, a worker with a limp leg. Her name is Leora, he said softly. Another followed. She helped me once when I fainted. She gave me her water. A third whispered. She is not cursed. She is strong. The overseers turned in shock. The workers were speaking together, quietly but steadily. They began to murmur, Leora, Leora. The overseers backed away slightly, realizing they had lost control. For years these workers had stayed silent, heads down. But now, the silence was breaking. The young man turned, helping Leora to her feet. Her legs shook, but he held her steady. Their eyes met, hers full of confusion, his full of fire. You're not alone anymore, he said, loud enough for all to hear. In the upper levels, hidden behind a glass wall, the factory manager watched everything, his face pale, his fists clenched. He had hoped the boy would be humiliated, but instead, something else had begun. Something dangerous. He turned to his advisors, his voice low. We must end this before the spark becomes a fire. But on the floor below, it was too late. The workers had seen something no punishment could erase: kindness, bravery, and a name that made the slave a person again. Leora stood taller now, still trembling, but not from fear. The pain in her hands was still there, but her heart beat with something new. They had tried to break her, but instead, they had awakened the first rebellion, and it had begun not with weapons, but with a human boy who refused to turn away. The air inside the factory was no longer the same. Something invisible had shifted. The workers stood taller. Even if their backs were still tired, their eyes, once blank and silent, now held something dangerous: hope. The name Leora echoed in corners where whispers once spoke only of fear. A name that had once belonged to a ghost girl, now moved like fire through the hearts of the broken. But not everyone welcomed this change. High above the factory floor, in the control room filled with screens and blinking lights, the manager stood in silence. His face was hard as stone. His arms folded tightly around him, the overseers waited for orders. One of them broke the silence. "Sir," the workers spoke up. They followed him. They disobeyed silently, but clearly the manager did not turn. "They forgot who owns this place," he said quietly. "Let me remind them." With a flick of his finger, he activated the alarm. A loud siren screamed across the factory. Red lights flashed. Metal doors slammed shut around the exits. Lockdown panic filled the workers. Some tried to run, but the doors were sealed. The machines stopped and silence returned, but this time, it was filled with dread. Leora stood beside the young man, her hand still wrapped, but her eyes clear and awake. "What is happening?" she whispered. He looked up at the red lights, his voice steady. "He's trying to scare them, to break their spirit before it rises fully." From hidden doors along the walls, armed guards entered, not overseers but true enforcers in black armor with stun sticks. Their faces were covered, their boots echoed like thunder. The manager's voice came through the speakers, deep and cold. "This is your final warning. Return to silence, obey, or be removed. My son no longer speaks for this factory. He is no longer my heir." Gasps rose across the floor. The young man took a step forward, raising his voice. "He disowns me because I defended what's right." He turned toward the guards, standing tall. "Do you see this girl? Her name is Leora. She bled for your machines, and still she stood strong. Are we monsters if we care? Are we weak for saying enough?" The guards hesitated. For the first time, orders weren't followed immediately. Their grips on their weapons loosened just slightly. The manager growled into the speaker. "Take him down now." A guard stepped forward, but another placed a hand on his shoulder, shaking his head one by one. A few guards lowered their stun sticks, confused, unsure. The courage of one man had shaken even their loyalty. The manager's voice screamed louder. "Do you forget who pays you? Obey." But the factory floor had changed. It was no longer ruled by orders from above. It was ruled by the people standing side by side below. Then it happened. A worker stepped forward beside the boy, a scarred alien man with a limp. He raised his voice. "I will stand with him." Another joined, then another, and suddenly, the floor filled with workers standing shoulder to shoulder. Facing the guards, they did not carry weapons, but they carried something more powerful: unity. Leora looked around, tears in her eyes. "They're standing for me," she whispered. The boy smiled. "No, Leora. They're standing for themselves too," the speaker crackled. But the manager's voice was no longer clear. Only static remained. His power had crumbled under the weight of something he never understood: compassion. Finally, the head of the guard stepped forward. He looked at the boy and said, "What do you want?" The boy took a breath, his voice strong. "Release the workers from their collars, give them food, rest and safety. Treat them as people, not slaves." The guard looked at the others, then nodded. "Open the doors." A loud click echoed across the factory, and one by one the locks disengaged. Light poured in as the heavy doors slowly opened for the first time without fear. The workers stepped out into sunlight, blinking, breathing, free, not by law, but by their own courage. Leora stood still, tears falling down her cheeks. She turned to the boy. "You lost everything for me." He gently held her hand. "No, I gained everything. I found who I really am." Outside the factory, news began to spread. Of a human who stood for an alien girl. Of a factory that changed not through violence, but through one simple act: standing up. The manager's empire began to crumble. Workers in other places whispered the name Leora, like a symbol, and the young man became something more than a rebel. He became a reason for others to rise. Leora looked at the world beyond the gates and whispered, "I never thought I'd live to see the sky like this." The boy smiled. "And now you'll never have to look down again, together." They walked into the light, and behind them, the factory that once broke thousands began to fall, not with fire but with freedom.